Let's have a conversation about it. I am joined, man himself, Laith Marouf. Laith Marouf, he's an award-winning multimedia producer, media policy law consultant, focused on liberation and decolonization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. You can find Laith on Free Palestine TV on Twitter or freepalestine.video. How you doing, Laith? You doing okay, man?
Doing good. I'm home today, so no from the field reporting there for you.
Well, good. You're safer. So I'm always happy about that. I am super curious on your take on the Qatar thing. Israel attacks Doha. Trump lured Hamas in with fake negotiations. Apparently, some Hamas members or political bureau was able to get out. Many did not. And so some were killed. Doha apparently is an outrage with the prime minister claiming that there's going to be some kind of response. They go to the UN Security Council and they complain to the UN Security Council. Israel was not mentioned in the responding, let's say, the response from the UN Security Council. Apparently, Israel has threatened Turkey, Egypt, and threatened to hit Doha once again. Doha has called an emergency meeting with, I guess, the other Gulf states. And they've apparently had a meeting with Trump or Marco Rubio today. Give me your take on this. I'm very curious about this because Doha seems very animated and shocked that they were hit. And for me, I don't quite get why they're shocked. Israel has murdered Palestinians, you could say Arab Muslims, with impunity for the last several years. They have committed an open genocide. They've raped Palestinians on camera, with the majority of the public saying this is fair game. They have murdered babies. They have murdered starving people for sport, seemingly very enthusiastic about it. They videotaped themselves doing this. They've invaded Lebanon and murdered people in Lebanon. They invaded Syria, murdered people in Syria. Why did they think that they were somehow different and that they were beyond also getting hit?
Well, I obviously, for me, it's all a theatrical act. The Qataris knew that this was going to happen. They didn't activate their own air defenses. They didn't fight it back. And the Americans knew that it was going to happen. You know, the United States has its most advanced radar array outside of North America here in South Palestine. So they saw the Israeli jets taking off, and British and American tanker jets refueled those Israeli jets on the way and on the way back to their attack on Doha. So for me, it's clear that this is just theatrics. And, you know, if there was a reason to have these theatrics, is because they're trying to hide the fact that, you know, a supposed ally of the United States, who has paid so much money to Trump and his cabal, that we were told by the Western media that that's the way. If you just give Trump what he wants, if you ally yourself with the United States, you wouldn't be bombarded like Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Libya. If you just give in and hand over some money to the gangster for protection. And what has happened is that all that protection money didn't get Qatar nothing. So the reason Qatar is moved by the empire to have all this rah-rah in the media is just to cover up the fact that they are a wimp that could be whipped around by the supposed gangster that is protecting them.
So when articles come out and say that they are reconsidering their relationship with the U.S., this kind of oil for protection racket that they establish, or that they feel in some cases trapped, because how do you escape the hegemon that you've been dependent on for so many years to keep your government intact? And now you realize that you are susceptible to attack just as much as any other country in that region. You don't think those articles are hitting on something that, for all intents and purposes, this is purely just acting?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, every sovereigntist Arab leader since Jamal Abdel Nasser and the Syrian nationalist movements in the 50s, and Gaddafi, Saddam, Assad, everybody told these royal families that are ruling under protection of the West that you will be next after us. And so suddenly for them to understand that after 80 years of Arab thinkers and Arab leaders telling these regimes that once those who are sovereigntists are out of the picture, there's nothing to protect you, right? And this is what it is. In the end, I see this as just more media cover for these elites that participated in the genocide in Gaza. The Saudis, the Emiratis, the Jordanians all participated in the genocide in Gaza through supplying the Zionist colony with all its needs and giving it political cover and jailing and killing anyone within their own population. By the way, there's at least 2,000 Saudis that have been executed by the Saudi regime since the beginning of the genocide because of political posts against the genocide in Gaza. There is more political prisoners in Qatar than there is in huge countries like Iraq or Syria or even Egypt. There's something like 30 or 40,000 Qataris that are in jail for their political speech. And this is a population of under 800,000. The citizens of Qatar is under 800,000 people, and you have 40,000 political prisoners. This is the realities of these regimes that supposedly are right now not happy that this attack happened in Doha. So nothing will happen. Qatar will not retaliate. And the genocide is gonna continue in Gaza.
Oh, I don't think they're going to do anything about the genocide. They obviously don't care. I mean, keep in mind, these were the people who bankrolled the ethnic cleansing in Syria that's taking place. And so this kind of grandstanding, talking about international law and everything else, they don't care about that stuff. But it seems to me that they may care about what they consider to be a broken deal. Like meaning, hey, Trump, we made a deal with you and we made a deal with other presidents that you treat them that way, but we are somehow different. And they just got their wake-up call. You're not different. You will be hit anytime they decide to hit you. And we expect you to not have a response to that hit. In the UN Security Council today, for example, Egypt was there. And it's a wild thing to watch a country bordering, right here, this clip. They are shaking hands with each other like, hey, man, I got your back. I mean,
a national
for the statement, the representative.
Qatar is not alone. Your Excellency, Sheikh Mohammed, Egypt and national security are all at the stake. And thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Egypt for the statement.
Effectively,
the representative of Pakistan.
Hey, you're not alone. We're backing you. We got your back in this. Like, is that true to any degree at all? Like, does Egypt have their back? Does Saudi Arabia have their back? Like, these are just strongly worded statements without any kind of backing at all to those statements. Is there any, I guess, in your mind, reevaluation of priorities? And now that they know they're next, any kind of coordination at all that you're expecting out of this?
Sorry about that. Talk is cheap, obviously, right? So everybody knows that proverb. So, and this is what these vassals are allowed to do. They're allowed to just talk. And in fact, they do the opposite of what they say. And that just helps the propaganda machine to undermine anyone that is actually doing something against the genocide and against Zionism and colonialism. that has been the deal that the colonial powers, whether it was the British, the French, and then the Americans and the Israelis, have allowed to the vassal regimes in the Arabic world. They can talk as much as they want, as long as they are actually doing the opposite behind the closed doors, which they are. You know, the genocide in Gaza will end right now if Egypt decides that there will be no more shipping going through the Suez Canal, going through its own ports to the Zionist colony. The biggest, the largest amount of shipping, 80% of all shipping going into the Zionist colony is coming from Turkey and Egypt, by the way, in the Mediterranean. So they can, without lifting one gun, have a tremendous effect on the viability of the Zionist project of genocide in Gaza and the West Bank. And so Egypt can do a lot, and it doesn't want to, because it's a vassal. It cannot do anything. I mean, this is even before us talking about how about a blockade by Egypt and Turkey on the Eastern Mediterranean to stop shipping to the Zionist colony. We see European ships blockading the shores of Lebanon and checking every boat that comes into Lebanon. We saw a blockade on Syria for a decade. Why not here? Turkey was participating in the blockade on Syria. Why isn't it doing it on the Zionist colony? So talk is cheap, and it's hard to straighten a dog's tail, right? You have to chop it off. And at this moment, these regimes that have been in the service of Western colonialism for 80 years, it would be childish to think that they will change their behavior patterns just like that.
Right.
I don't see anything happening that will change the behavior of these states.
What does it mean now, though, that Doha is fair game? Israel has already said, we'll get them next time, meaning we will do this again. They've even threatened to bomb Turkey. They've threatened to bomb Egypt. Let me ask it this way. Do you think that Turkey, on some level, made a mistake in the way that they've taken Syria? I mean, they thought that they were going to get a compliant government that they can effectively control. And what they ended up with was a territory that was now much closer to Israel, since Israel has stolen and occupied parts of Syria. So Turkey and Israel are now rubbing up against each other in regards to borders. Do you think this is problematic for Istanbul? And weirder question, if Istanbul is attacked, can they activate Article 5 in NATO?
Never. Never will NATO come to the aid of Turkey against the Zionist colony. And Turkey will take the Zionist whipping and be quiet if it happens. And I know there's, for more than a decade, people were talking about neo-Ottomanism, and Turkey being propped up to recapture the Arabs as its servants, right? As part of its, role envisioned with Obama and Al Jazeera and the quote-unquote Arab Spring. But that was actually a distraction. The real role of Turkey is neo-Mongolism, okay? Reverse Mongol-Turkic invasion. And yesterday, for instance, just so people can understand, the Organization of Turkic States met at the call of Turkey. That means all the Central Asian states, minus Mongolia, with Turkey and Azerbaijan meeting. Okay, so the role of Turkey right now is it's already in terms of its effects on the Arabic space is done. All it was supposed to do is destabilize Syria and Iraq, the north of Iraq and the north of Syria, to the point where the states, federal states, are unable to function. Okay, and that's what happened. Now they're supposed to retake back all the Wahhabi death squads from Central Asia the Uyghurs, the Turkmen, the Uzbeks, and so forth, along with the other Wahhabi squads that they have gathered in Syria, and take them in a reverse Mongol invasion. Okay, this is why Trump took that corridor between Azerbaijan and Armenia to make it that there's now a land connection to bring those back to Central Asia to destabilize China and Russia from their soft belly. Okay, right. So Turkey, if it's attacked with a Zionist colony, will take the beating and continue because it knows its role now and what is allowed to it as a sphere of influence. The sphere of influence that Turkey is allowed right now by the empire is that Turkic Mongolic space in Central Asia, and it has a duty to deliver on in the next 10 years to make that region into a inflamed soft belly of China and Russia.
And Erdogan is clear on this, and Erdogan is on board for this.
Yes, definitely is on board with this, and we saw the beginnings of that affirmation when Turkey entered the military battle between Azerbaijan and Armenia on the side of Azerbaijan. Right. And so it's clear now, and Turkey was crucial in creating that Trump corridor, between Turkey and Azerbaijan. So it's they know what is required of them, and they're delivering on it.
Will it ever get to the point, from your point of view, that the Gulf states will get sick of being vassals? That at some point they get pushed too far? For example, right now, and again, this could also be just pure theater, so I accept the premise of this, where they're trying to, because I think, and I could be wrong on this, that there's an underlying reality to it, that a lot of the stuff is theater in the way that you're explaining it. I agree with you. But I think they're probably humiliated by what just happened and may even find it to be a betrayal. Now, whether they would accept it or not is secondary to the point that they're humiliated by it, so agreed. This is them meeting with Russia just a couple of days after the bombing in Doha. So is this really just them, we're going to make this show? Or is it, we want a better level of respect, even as vassals, and we want to show that the U.S. is not the only game in town in this regard, even though, as you point out, they're not changing their behavior. I guess I'm trying to ask, is there an underlying reality to this, even beyond the theatrics?
Well, let's go back to the fact that there's 800,000 citizens of Qatar. I think there's like 30,000 American troops on the ground inside Qatar in the Al Udeid and other bases that are there. And there's tens of thousands of American soldiers in Bahrain and on where the oil fields are in what is Saudi. So it's checkmate.
Oh, I see what you mean. It doesn't matter what they want. Like, it doesn't matter.
What is the actual army of Qatar? Okay.
Yeah.
Remember when Bahrain, when the population of Bahrain revolted at the beginning of the quote-unquote Arab Spring, and they're still demonstrating till today. Bahrain is, maybe there's 700 or 650,000 citizens. Okay, the Bahraini state couldn't suppress the demonstrations, so they drove in Saudi troops and Pakistani troops, and took over the streets, beat up everybody, and it's done. So there is no way that Qatar can defend itself even from the troops that are on its own territory. How is that logical? Yeah. Iraq, for at least now 5 or 6 years, have demanded through vote in parliament and through prime ministers and presidents that the American troops leave Iraq. Did the American troops leave Iraq? No, they didn't, and they
They
will
did not.
never.
They did not.
Iraq can't get the American troops nicely out. How can Qatar get them out? Or how can Qatar attack Israel from Qatari territory without American help? It's illogical. There is a bigger chance, there was always a bigger chance of a revolt in the Arabian Peninsula, as happened in the 60s and 70s in Oman and what is now Saudi, and in Bahrain, as has happened there, than ever a change in the positions of the royal families. This is why the Americans and British before them, and protected these appointed royal families that didn't exist even before the occupations by the British and the Americans. The Saud family did not rule what is now Saudi Arabia before the British gave them the guns to do so, right? And so the Western powers protected these royal families against the Arab revolts in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and kept them in power. And so the only thing that could remove these royal families and or change the direction of the states in the Gulf is revolution. And that's what they always feared.
Yeah, MBS mentioned that also at one point. Effectively, he said something to the effect of, my population is completely against the position that we are in. Basically, my population hates what they're doing to the Arabs. And so you're hanging me out to dry by doing that as a genocide, what he was openly saying was he was concerned about his life. That
Look, I just so you understand how obedient and attached the royal families in the Gulf to the West is, we can look at the 1979 revolt in Saudi, where revolutionaries took over Mecca, okay? And the Saudi state called in British and French paratroopers to land inside Mecca on the top of the Kaaba. Mecca is supposed to be a place where non-Muslims cannot enter.
Yeah.
Okay? The whole city, you're not allowed if you're not Muslim to enter. They made British and French paratroopers land on the Kaaba, on the house of God, okay, on that cube, okay? And slaughtered from top of the Kaaba with machine guns the women and children, because it was mainly women and children that occupied the Mecca, the holy mosque, during that revolt, and went into Zamzam well, the well of life that you go drink from in Mecca, and killed people and threw them in the well. This is what the Sauds would do to stay in power, and would allow the French and the British to do in desecration of Islam just to stay in power. Okay, so to expect today the Saud families to change,
not so
it's
much.
Delusion.
Yeah, they're not going nowhere. All of this is just talk. This is them effectively trying to pacify their populations by acting tougher than what they're really going to do. Wow. I didn't know that. That is rough. That is rough, which is they landed on the house of God and murdered the people that were there. I mean, but this was the deal, right? Oil for protection. And this is the deal that we're seeing play out all the way to this day. What, they went back to the 40s?
Oh yeah, going back all the way to the 1920s, to World War I, before World War I even, okay? So look, just so people can understand how un-Muslim these royal families are. You know, Prophet Muhammad, when he captured Mecca, he said anyone who's in the holy mosque, whether Muslim or not, and or somebody who's in their home or they're in their house of worship, just lock the door and you're safe. These people brought in infidels according to them, according to what they tell us publicly, the Wahhabis, that they consider Christians infidels. They brought infidels into the house of God and killed Muslims. that were unarmed. This is why, you know, it's impossible to you know, expect any change from a fabricated royal family, from a fabricated Islam that is counter to Islam, that is brought into power to destroy Islam by the British and the Americans after them, as they did with bin Laden in Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and kill in the name of Islam, basically. Yeah, no, there will be no change.
Explain that for me. You said that this is effectively a desecration of Islam in the way that they push their version of Islam, that this is not real Islam. This is something else that they're doing at the behest of the West.
Yes, yes. Look, the biggest, and this is not a religious preaching lesson, okay, or trying to sell Islam to anybody. But think about it this way: the only competition to Western Christianity in the third world, in Africa and Asia, was Islam. Mm-hmm. And you know, how do you stop this? You need to create a bad image to Islam, one that is comparable to the Crusades, comparable to the genocides that were done in the name of Christianity in the Americas and Oceania. And you know, the only way to do that is to fabricate a version of Islam that is a tool, and that's what they did. The Wahhabi cult in Saudi is empowered by the British in the late 1800s, early 1900s, to counter the Islam of Baghdad, the Islam of Damascus, the Islam of Istanbul, or the Islam of Cairo, that was cosmopolitan. Okay, whether you know, so this is what has happened, and they were successful in defeating Syrian unificationists, Arab unificationists, communists, socialists in the Arabic world through, and also defeating the Ottoman Empire by pushing forward this fabricated Wahhabi cult as a counter. And then they took that successful project and they exported it, since it succeeded in defeating the third world movement in the Arabic world, and exported it to Afghanistan to defeat the Soviet Union, and then now, as we see, as an excuse to have non-ending wars anywhere the US wants.
Yeah, and now they have a local home base in Syria where they can export it to pretty much anywhere in the Middle East. Wow. Laith, that's a hell of a lesson. Like, because I don't know if people know that. Like, I think from the Western point of view, when they talk about Islam, what they're talking about, especially if they're degrading it or they're attacking it, they're talking about Wahhabism. They're not talking about, like, me being in Indonesia. They're not talking about this, right? Like the prayers that take place, the people you engage with. That's not what they're talking about. They're referring to what was effectively generated and crafted purely for the sake, I guess, this Western version of this mutated version of Islam that they've effectively promoted and pushed out to various parts of the Middle East. Do you see that changing? Like, do you see, well, let me ask it this way. Where do you see Syria going? Because you're right, they have effectively, Wahhabis have taken over a state. Where does that go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Syria will stay for long under the control of the HTS and the Wahhabi death squads. I don't know what's going to be the future for it, but Syria is not a easy country to control. And the difference between the Islam of the Wahhabis and that's of the majority of the Sunni Muslims in Syria is a huge.
Yeah.
There is no way that you can integrate that. And as we see, the country is mainly out of control of the HTS beyond the population centers between Aleppo and Damascus. The rest of the country is under control of the Russians, the Israelis, the Americans, the Kurds, whatever, you know. So there is no way for HTS to mold a new Syrian. Okay, there's no way. And there's also too many Syrians right now outside the country that the HTS has no way to mold also into a new Syrian. So the future is, in my mind, clear that Syria is going to escape this period of colonization. Remember, you know, Syria was the first country to escape colonialism post World War II, the first country on the planet. So the occupation of Syria, even by direct French and British rule, didn't last, you know, 30 somewhat years, right? So now, of course, time is much faster, how developments happen. So things are not going to last long. And as we see the battle in Palestine and in the whole region is moving fast. So anyone that wants to create realities, they understand that it's not going to be permanent. The effects of outside events outside Syria are much bigger than the effects of internal events on the future of Syria.
Where does Israel play into this objective of creating greater Israel? I mean, obviously they're trying it. They're not even hiding the ball. They're openly stating that this is what they want to do, which means parts of Egypt, parts of Turkey, parts of Saudi Arabia, etc. These states have to know it at this point. Where does, I know you said that Israel is going to fundamentally lose ultimately because they can't necessarily maintain themselves. The contradictions themselves are going to effectively destroy the way that the country operates. But it doesn't seem like any of these countries are making moves against it at all, even when these countries are being attacked. Doha was attacked directly, no moves against it. Al-Shara or Al-Jalani has, despite being attacked continuously, has tried to make deals with Israel. Istanbul talks a big game, but of course, as you point out, still delivers oil to the Zionist colony. They seem to be continuously moving despite, I guess, the level of hatred that is effectively poured on it from the rest of the world. How do you see that going? I mean, do you see them accomplishing this objective, or do you see this objective falling apart at some point?
I mean, Greater Israel is there in effect already. I mean, it's not drawn on the map, but the Israelis can run amok anywhere in Syria they want to, in Jordan, in Egypt. They can buy and sell and, you know, under the protection of the Egyptian and the Jordanian state. We saw videos of these Zionist rabbis going into the perfectly preserved synagogues in Damascus. By the way, the state of Syria protected all the heritage sites of the Jewish population that left, probably better than much of the architectural heritage of Damascus and Aleppo. That being said, you know, so why do they need to change the map? Do they need to change the map if they can? Yesterday, the spokesperson of the Israeli military just walked into Lebanon and recorded himself from Al-Khiyam village, just like that. Does he really need to change the map to say that he's in control, that he has Greater Israel? He can go into Turkey anytime he wants to and buy anything that he wants to and do whatever they want to, and the Turkish state will do what they want. So again, there's no need for them to change the map to have achieved Greater Israel. There's even a video of an Israeli rabbi inside Mecca, just from last year. Okay, so again, and the guy wasn't hiding himself. So again, why does he need to change the map? He doesn't need to change the map. It's already, they're already under his control. And just so people can understand it, this idea of this Abrahamic Accord is the idea of having Islam surrender to imperialist rule and accept its perversion into a religion that says there is a chosen people, and those chosen people are the Jews, as has happened in the perversion of Christianity into an imperialist, a new version of imperialist Christianity, where now, Christian preachers in the United States tell their own flock that they are not the chosen people, that there's a chosen people, that they're better than them, and your place on earth is to serve them if you want to go to heaven. Okay, so this is what the Abrahamic Accord is about. Changing the perspective of Islam from being a liberationist religion against foreign occupation into an imperialist religion that's governed from Tel Aviv or New York or what have you. And for those who don't believe in God, from our listeners here, think about it this way. All the iterations of Abrahamic, quote unquote, religions that came in our region here, what we call now today the Arabic people and their ancestors. You can think about it outside a divine context, okay? That they were responses to foreign occupations and colonization. Okay, so let's say the Egyptians, the Romans and the Persians were occupying this land and dividing the local tribes, to serve them. This is why Abraham came with the idea of one God, one nation, one people, from one mother, one father. Okay, or that God reminded him that, if you are a person who's believing, because of the social moment of development in the society, that God said this is the right time to show this knowledge to these humans, if you want to be a person who thinks in divine ways. And Judaism was another iteration of that. And once Judaism became a tool of the imperial rule of Rome, and the Jewish elite in Palestine collaborated with the Romans, this is how Jesus was born, and the thought of Christianity, again, as a rebellion against foreign rule. And once the Christianity was moved from Jerusalem to the Vatican in Rome and became an imperial religion, that again was working against the unification of the local tribes here, the peoples, the proto-Semites, the ancestors of Arabic people. That's when Islam was born and Muhammad was born. And this is, so now what we see is an attempt to usurp Islam, as it was with Judaism and Christianity, and make them into an imperialist rule religion. And this is what the Arab and Muslim people are fighting against.
Do you think that part of the reason that Qatar was bombed was to get across, I guess, two things? One, they probably did want to kill Hamas and murder them in some kind of lay-in-wait trap. But also, to get across, you better sign these accords. Like, if you think getting hit once is bad, if you don't sign these accords, it's going to be worse. Meaning, trying to push Saudi Arabia and Qatar into signing these accords under the threat of force and violence.
I think the reason for the attacks was to kill the negotiators, which they didn't succeed in. The Zionists do not want to stop the genocide in Gaza. And they kept on killing different leaders in Hamas, whether the leaders, Haniya in Iran, or the leadership in Lebanon or in Syria before the fall of Syrian government, and on the ground in Gaza, any of the political leaders. So there's because and each time it was like killing one layer of the political leadership and then talking to the next layer to see if they will retreat in terms of terms for the ceasefire. Okay, and every time they didn't like what they heard, they killed those persons, and they're like, okay, let's see the next level. Will they be the ones that? Well, now they were trying to kill the last level of connection between the outside world and the Palestinian resistance on the ground in Gaza, which means if you kill those, there will be no more communication avenue with the Palestinian revolutionaries on the ground, and therefore there will be no more negotiations. So they were trying to end the possibility of negotiations as even a media ploy, right? Because they're moving into Gaza City and they want to conduct a mass genocide. So it's done. There's no more talk. Now they have missed their shot, and we see there's going to be another attempt at quote-unquote negotiations, which is not going to happen anything, but it's just actually going to give them more cover as they conduct the genocide.
Well, I mean, is Qatar even going to have further negotiations after this?
They'll do whatever master tells them, that's for sure.
Wow. Laith, thank you for this. I love these history lessons because this is stuff that we are not exposed to. And just your take is fantastic. It's awesome. And I always appreciate when you can go down and explain this stuff in this kind of historical context way to kind of illuminate it for all of us. No, man, I really appreciate it. Do you think they're going to accept this submission? Meaning, are these states, knowing full well that the populations of these states are not going to be happy with accepting Israel as it commits a genocide? I mean, if you remember, initially it was, well, we're not going to work with you if you're committing a genocide. And somewhere along the way that changed into, okay, well, we'll still work with you as you committed genocide, and we'll still come to these accords. But there was complaints coming out of Saudi Arabia and coming out of Qatar, if I'm not mistaken, about the West Bank and having the West Bank being taken. And again, there was some people postulated that was the other reason for the attack, in order to basically say, shut up and sign. Will they submit?
I don't think they will sign anything as states, like Saudi at least, about the Abrahamic Accord until there's no more Palestinians to resist. Okay. It's all because they don't really need to sign any accord.
What do you mean?
They've already enslaved Islam to Zionism, the Saudis. Okay. So what else does Israel really want? There's Saudi preachers literally going online and saying there's a chosen people and the Israelis and this is their land.
They're really saying that? Like,
yeah.
They're really out there saying that?
Just like those evangelical preachers that are on American television doing that, telling the Christians that you are less than and there's a chosen people and you're here to serve them. There's Saudi preachers doing that. Okay, so there's no need to sign anything. There's a letter from the King of Saudi. This is another historical. Let me just pull the date on it so I don't say the wrong date. But there's a letter from the King of Saudi written to the British, okay, his handler, British handler. And this is from the 1930s, okay? And he says, this is, King Abdulaziz, okay? The founder of the Third Kingdom of Sauds. And he says, I have no, and he's like, I admit to Sir Percy Cox, who's the British representative to the Gulf area from their India office. Okay.
Right.
I have no objection to give Palestine to the poor Jews or anyone else that Britain sees as needed. And I will not object to its opinion, Britain's opinion, until the clock of end of time coos. Okay, signed King of Saudi Abdulaziz. Okay, so this is how it is. The guy was receiving, because remember, this was at a time before the oil discovery,
Right.
okay, in the Gulf. And the kings and emirs in the Gulf were receiving salaries, monthly salaries, from the British office in India that was governing the whole region. Okay, so this is a person that ate from the hands of the British intelligence. The whole family has been bred since then. So it's not gonna be.
This is not new, basically. This is historical context. Like, they followed the stuff through history. Laith, fantastic spot. Thank you for this. Honestly, I was looking at the audience response, and they were like, "This is a great guest here, and great guest indeed." Laith Marouf, he is an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples, and building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented and underrepresented minority communities around the world. You can follow Laith on Free Palestine TV. That's on Twitter. You can also follow him on freepalestine.video. That is if you're looking on the web. Laith, you be safe today, man. Have a good one, okay?
See you soon.
Bye-bye.